It all began with a glimmer on August 6, 2025. A moment so quiet, so sterile in a lab, and yet so deeply unsettling in its implications. The James Webb Space Telescope, the most powerful observatory in human history, was forced into emergency override mode, not for a supernova, not for a black hole, but for something far more local and far more terrifying, a comet, or at least something that looked like one. Designated 3I Atlas, it was first assumed to be another interstellar wanderer, cold, silent, and predictable. But when Webb's sensors locked on and the first wave of data poured in, what they captured wasn't just unexpected. It was impossible. The chemical signature it revealed didn't fit any natural model. The ratios were grotesque, the elements mismatched, the behavior erratic. And as the numbers kept arriving, one fear began to quietly thread its way through the minds of every astrophysicist watching the feed. What if this isn't a comet at all? What if this is something sent? The first sign that something was terribly wrong came from the comet's coma, the bright envelope of gas surrounding its nucleus. Normally, at this distance, 6 astronomical units from the sun, a comet should be asleep, frozen, inert. The sunlight out there is weak, too feeble to cause any meaningful outgassing. But 3I Atlas was already active, violently so. James Webb picked up spectral lines dominated not by water vapor as expected, but by carbon dioxide. A lot of it, 8 times more than water. That ratio, 8-to-1, was not just unusual, it was unprecedented. Typical comets barely reach 0.7. Even Borisov, the last interstellar visitor, hovered around 0.5. This was something else. A body spewing carbon dioxide at a rate that couldn't be explained by temperature or solar proximity. It was as if the object had been designed to vent this exact compound under conditions where nature wouldn't permit it. Even stranger, the coma was ghostly thin. There was almost no dust, no solid debris, no typical chaos, just gas. Controlled, smooth, and highly specific gas emissions that hinted at a different kind of chemistry, one alien to our understanding of comet formation. As the Webb telescope locked in deeper, the story turned darker. Its sensors picked up something even more disturbing than gas: nickel. Strong, consistent nickel spectral lines started appearing across the ultraviolet and near-infrared bands. Not traces, not anomalies, but powerful signals. Clear, repetitive, and real. Nickel lines stacked perfectly above the background, rising in concentration the closer the object came. At 3.8 astronomical units, the output was already measuring above 10 to the 21st atoms per second. By 2.85 astronomical units, it had increased by an entire order of magnitude. But the shock wasn't the presence of nickel. It was what was missing: iron. Across all instruments, from Webb to the Very Large Telescope to Gemini, iron was absent. Flat, dead, no signal, no trace, not even noise. And that's not normal. In every natural comet and meteorite ever recorded, nickel and iron are partners. Their ratio is tightly coupled, 1 part nickel to 15 parts iron, always, until now. 3I Atlas broke this rule in the most violent way possible. Nickel outweighed iron by more than 40-to-1. There's no known natural process that can create such a split. In labs, separating these metals takes energy, machinery, intent. And here, drifting silently through space, was an object doing it passively. Or maybe, not passively at all. Even before the chemical signatures were fully decoded, something else caught the eye of the Pan-STARRS tracking network. 3I Atlas was accelerating, but not like a comet would, not from solar heating or pressure. It was too far from the sun, too cold for sublimation jets to generate that much momentum. And yet, over the span of just 72 hours, the object's velocity increased by 0.12 meters per second squared. That number may sound small, but for a body 11 kilometers wide, the size of a city, that kind of acceleration is immense. Like seeing a cruise ship pick up speed in the middle of a dead calm ocean without engines. The change wasn't smooth either. Analysts observed micro-jumps, jittery flickers layered over the main arc of motion, as if something inside the object was turning on and off and on again. Attempts to explain it through outgassing, fractured crusts, or solar winds failed. None could match the rhythm. None could explain the regularity, because it was regular. Every 7.2 hours, 3I Atlas brightened, sharply, predictably, like a lighthouse. The brightness curve wasn't chaotic, like tumbling debris. It was locked, clockwork. Some suggested a sheet-like surface catching sunlight. Others proposed a hollow rotating frame. But one thing was clear. This wasn't a rock. It was something moving with precision. And here's where the science begins to tremble. Because when everything is ruled out, when sublimation, randomness, and chaotic structure all fail, what remains is a possibility no one wants to face. That 3I Atlas is engineered, built, manufactured, perhaps not by intention. Perhaps it's debris, a fragment, a derelict vessel from a civilization that died before Earth grew forests. But maybe it's something worse, something alive, a probe still active, a mechanism still responding, a system that sees us and doesn't care, one that follows a trajectory not set by nature but by design. Because no comet should wake up in the deep freeze, emit metallic nickel without iron, accelerate without fuel, and spin with mechanical rhythm. And yet here it is, doing all of that, in front of our best instruments, with no effort to hide. The James Webb override wasn't just a technical reaction, it was a whisper of panic. An unspoken consensus that this isn't normal, that this might be the first time we're looking directly at alien machinery. And even if we're wrong, the simple fact that we can't tell the difference anymore, that alone is the warning. As the acceleration data sparked debate across observatories, a new stream of information emerged, one that was even harder to dismiss as natural: the light curve. Photometric data from Gemini South and the TESS Space Telescope revealed a periodic brightening of 3I Atlas every 7.2 hours. That in itself wouldn't be too unusual. Many comets and asteroids tumble and reflect sunlight in repeating patterns. But this was no chaotic tumble. The brightness spikes were too clean, too exact. They didn't fade gradually or flicker irregularly like the spin of an irregular rock. They appeared and vanished like a beacon, on and off, in perfect intervals. Even when gas emissions increased and the object accelerated, this light rhythm didn't change. It held its cycle like a metronome. This stability suggested something far more structured, something that wasn't just responding to sunlight randomly, but reacting with precision. Some theorized it could be a light sail, a wide, reflective structure designed to catch solar radiation. Such a system could, in theory, account for both the acceleration and the regular flashing pattern. Others proposed a rotating platform with flat panels, but all agreed. The behavior didn't match any known natural object. This wasn't a spin. It was a signal, a mechanical pulse. And with every pass, it whispered the same message to the instruments watching from Earth. I am not what you think I am. The moment everything shifted came not from the object itself, but from the people observing it. On August 6th, at 2:11 GMT, ground-based observatories sent an alert to the Webb Control Center. The spectral data pouring in from other telescopes couldn't be ignored. CO2 emissions off the charts, metallic readings spiking, and a sudden velocity curve that made no gravitational sense. That's when it happened. The emergency override, an extremely rare protocol that interrupts every scheduled observation and diverts the James Webb Space Telescope from its long-term mission to investigate a single anomaly. It's a move that burns precious time, fuel, and budget, and it's only been executed a handful of times since the telescope was launched, and never before for an interstellar object. Within minutes, the override chain climbed past committees, over project timelines, and landed directly on the desk of the project scientist. The approval had to be unanimous, and it was. The Webb pivoted, its instruments recalibrated, and at 2:17 GMT, it locked onto 3I Atlas with the NIRSPEC instrument. What came down in those first packets of data wasn't just strange, it was historic. The spectra didn't show the icy fingerprint of a comet. They showed a carbon chemistry so extreme, so volatile, that it made every known solar system body look tame. The decision to override wasn't just a scientific choice, it was a silent alarm. The most advanced telescope ever built had just paused the cosmos to chase a machine. The deeper scientists dove into Webb's data, the harder it became to find anything familiar. The carbon dioxide to water ratio was completely out of line, but it was the metal profile that tore the rulebook apart. In every comet, every asteroid, every meteorite ever studied, iron and nickel travel together. They are born in the same stellar forges, bonded by physics and fused in ancient explosions. The ratio may vary slightly, but the partnership is absolute. Not here. In 3I Atlas, nickel was everywhere, and iron was gone. Not reduced, not masked. Gone. Every check came back clean. The ultraviolet spectrograph teams cross-referenced over a dozen known iron lines. None appeared. Nickel, by contrast, lit up the spectrum like a floodlight. Wavelengths stacking at 3,415, 3,524, 3,769 angstroms and more, clear above the noise. The only known process capable of such separation in a lab involves high-energy chemistry, industrial pressures, and precise control. The team proposed one explanation: the presence of nickel carbonyl, a volatile compound that vaporizes at just 43 degrees Celsius. But even this molecule is rare, and it doesn't explain the total absence of iron. The result was a spectral fingerprint that didn't match anything natural. Not even Borisov, not even Oumuamua. It matched nothing. A chemical composition so skewed, so deliberate, that even the most conservative voices began to ask, what kind of place, what kind of world, or what kind of technology could form this? The strangest part of this unfolding mystery doesn't come from deep space. It comes from Earth, in museums, in tombs, in ancient texts that speak of iron from the sky. The Egyptians called it metal of heaven. The blade buried with King Tutankhamun contains nearly 11% nickel, impossible to forge with ancient tools, but matching perfectly the chemical fingerprint of meteorites. Babylonian scribes wrote of falling stars and burning stones, always paired with omens of war and destruction. Across the ancient Near East, elite artifacts, rings, beads, daggers, appear crafted from metals richer in nickel than any earth ore. Metals that fell, that flashed, and that inspired awe and fear alike. And now, in 2025, we're watching the sky again, and seeing the same signature: high nickel, no iron, no known source. The Widmanstetten pattern, the crystal banding that only occurs in space-formed metal, is etched into relics older than cities. Historians and physicists alike now ask the question no one ever dared. What if those artifacts weren't just meteoric fragments, but evidence of contact? What if those metals were not just debris from the stars, but fragments of something that had come before and had already passed by? And what if 3I Atlas isn't just the next anomaly, but the next chapter in a very old book that we've barely begun to read? As scientists continued analyzing the high nickel exhaust and CO2-rich emissions, a researcher at Caltech noticed something disturbing hidden in the thermal data. Buried in the glow patterns from 3I Atlas was a subtle but consistent electromagnetic rhythm, a frequency pulse too regular to be random, yet too faint to be intentional broadcast. The Webb's sensors had recorded it, but initially dismissed it as instrumentation noise. It wasn't. When the emission data was sonified, converted to audible waveforms, it revealed a repeating beat, not music, not language, but something even more chilling: a mathematical cadence, prime intervals, Fibonacci-like ratios, geometric harmonics that echoed structures found in DNA and crystal growth in the design of ancient architecture. The signal wasn't strong enough to transmit across space, but strong enough to be read by any observer nearby. In other words, it was a breadcrumb trail, a kind of cosmic fingerprint embedded not in radio waves, but in the behavior of the object itself. And if we could hear it, others could too. The question wasn't who the signal was aimed at. The question was, who else has already heard it? Only days after the Webb override triggered global attention, geophysicists in the southern hemisphere began detecting anomalies in the Earth's magnetic field. Initially dismissed as fluctuations caused by minor solar activity, the truth became harder to ignore. In multiple locations, Antarctica, Argentina, Western Australia, identical ULF, ultra-low frequency, Pulses were registered, spaced at perfect 7.2-hour intervals, exactly matching the light curve periodicity of 3I Atlas. These pulses didn't follow the pattern of solar storms or lightning strikes. They didn't originate from above, but from within the Earth itself. And what's more, they mirrored the structure of the thermal frequency hidden in the object's emissions. Something deep in the Earth had begun to resonate, not loudly, not violently, but rhythmically, as if responding, coordinating, like a tuning fork catching the hum of a forgotten song. The idea that Earth's ancient systems, tectonic, electromagnetic, even biological, might synchronize with something passing through the solar system is terrifying. Not because it implies danger, but because it implies history. That this isn't the first time. That Earth may have already heard this frequency before, and whatever was dormant, just remembered. When plotted from its entry vector to its projected exit trajectory, 3I Atlas's course reveals something almost too perfect. The object doesn't simply move through space by gravity's pull, it navigates. It dodges. Its path avoids every major body in the system with remarkable precision, threading between gravitational wells like a spacecraft running a pre-programmed course. When compared with natural cometary paths, chaotic, warped, and gravitationally reactive, this object behaves with an eerie intentionality. In simulations, astronomers fed 3I Atlas's data into trajectory models used for planetary slingshot maneuvers, the kind NASA uses to plot interplanetary probes. The result? A 92.6% match with engineered flight paths. And then came something even more haunting. When projected forward, its course intersects a narrow spatial corridor just beyond the orbit of Saturn, a corridor theorized by some as the location of a hypothetical gravity null point, or even a Lagrange gateway into the outer heliopause. In short, the object isn't drifting, it's leaving, and doing so with a level of coordination no known natural body has ever displayed. The timing, the positioning, the acceleration, all of it points not just to travel, but to navigation, not to discovery, but to execution of mission. One, it seems, is nearly complete. And then, it went dark. Just as James Webb prepared for another round of high-resolution scans, just as the object crossed within 2.5 astronomical units of the Sun, 3I Atlas's emissions, both chemical and thermal, began to fade. The nickel spectral lines dimmed. The carbon dioxide outflow slowed. The periodic light curve flattened. And then, all at once, the object dropped below Webb's detection threshold, not because of distance or obstruction, but because it had stopped glowing altogether. This was not a natural fade. It was a shutdown. Every observable behavior ceased within the span of 11 hours. Instruments across the world confirmed it. Gemini, Subaru, the Very Large Telescope, even ground-based infrared telescopes in Chile recorded the same. 3I Atlas had gone cold. The silence was immediate, deliberate, almost like an act of camouflage, or worse, like the end of a broadcast. Because if 3I Atlas was transmitting, emitting, and reacting until now, maybe it wasn't hiding. Maybe it was searching, or activating, or testing. And when it found what it was looking for, it simply stopped, like a machine powering down after completing its final protocol, leaving us not with answers, but with the horrifying realization that we were never in control. We were only observers of something far older, and far more patient than anything we've imagined. Just when scientists thought 3I Atlas had completed its pass through the solar system, something impossible emerged in the latest trajectory models. Its course, originally expected to slingshot around the Sun and disappear into deep space, had altered subtly, but significantly. Rather than continuing outward, it had shifted ever so slightly, toward the inner system again. This wasn't a gravitational anomaly. The math was tight. The vectors confirmed it. 3I Atlas, now silent, now dark, had changed course, but not randomly. Its revised path intersected a specific zone between Earth and Venus, a zone known for its stable gravitational dynamics, but also, curiously, one of the few regions where several Earth-based satellites had recently reported intermittent signal interference. NASA initially dismissed the rerouting as observational error, but when 3 separate deep space radar facilities, Goldstone, Arecibo, and the Chinese Fast Array, corroborated the change, everything shifted. Because no comet adjusts its path after going dark. No natural object navigates to a zone of low detection. And certainly, nothing non-intelligent performs a maneuver with such surgical, calculated intent. Unless, of course, it was never meant to leave, but to stay. While engineers and astronomers raced to re-establish optical contact with 3I Atlas, a very different kind of discovery was unfolding inside a lab at MIT. There, a neural AI system had been fed terabytes of spectroscopic data from the Webb and Gemini observations, not to detect elements, but to look for structure. And it found one. The emission pattern of nickel and carbon dioxide, when visualized across time and adjusted for rotational variance, formed a multi-dimensional helix, a twisting structure embedded within the time series emissions. At first, it seemed meaningless, but when compared to Earth's earliest biological structures, a disturbing resemblance appeared. Early RNA strands, not perfect matches, but geometric parallels, recursions, folds ratios, enough for molecular biologists to pause. What if 3I Atlas wasn't just expelling gas? What if it was releasing coded biological scaffolding? Not alive, not cells, but something more ancient, something akin to a template. A broadcast not in sound, but in chemistry, like a seed trapped in amber, waiting for the right environment to take root. And what if Earth, or Mars, or some pre-selected point in the solar system was already preconditioned to receive that code? As researchers scrambled to re-establish visual contact, a radar ping experiment was conducted, standard deep space object tracking. But this time, something bounced not from 3I Atlas, but from an unexpected direction, the far side of the Moon. The signal wasn't a typical echo. It returned 0.23 seconds too early, and with spectral artifacts that didn't match the original waveform. At first, the anomaly was attributed to surface irregularities, but then it happened again, and again. Over 3 consecutive attempts, the ping was returned not just distorted, but modulated, with a pattern that bore the same interval timing as the pulses recorded from 3I Atlas weeks prior. That was when lunar data archives were consulted, and something terrifying came to light. During the passage of Oumuamua in 2017, similar modulations had been faintly recorded on the same coordinates. The pattern had returned. This wasn't a comet visiting a solar system, it was a system responding to something it recognized. And now, with the Moon echoing back alien frequencies, a new possibility emerged. That 3I Atlas wasn't an intruder, it was a trigger, and whatever was buried beneath the lunar crust had just been activated. 2 weeks after 3I Atlas's abrupt blackout, the James Webb Telescope quietly resumed its scheduled deep-field observations. But something was different. Several targets, distant quasars and exoplanets, showed background anomalies. Not in the stars themselves, but in the interstellar medium between. Faint, rhythmic dimming, low-frequency flux. When synchronized, the anomalies formed a repeating series, 7 pulses, followed by silence, then 7 more. And as scientists traced these events across galactic coordinates, they noticed something chilling. Each line of sight passed through a corridor aligned with 3I Atlas's trajectory. The implication? 3I Atlas wasn't just emitting something. It was part of a relay, a chain, a beacon, or worse, a countdown. And it had already started ticking. Whether this was a warning or an activation, no one could say. But one thing was clear. The event wasn't local anymore. The ripple had gone galactic. And here we are, standing at the edge of something we can't see, hearing the echoes of a protocol we never triggered. And yet, we're the ones being answered. We thought we were alone because we heard no voices. We assumed silence meant safety, and emptiness meant absence. But now, we know better. The James Webb Telescope didn't just detect a strange object. It recorded the execution of a program, a trajectory too clean, a chemistry too precise, a frequency too rhythmic. 3I Atlas wasn't broadcasting a message. It was running a sequence that altered the gravity around it, a sequence that echoed back from the Moon, a sequence that triggered electromagnetic tremors deep within our own planet. And now, we face the unspoken truth, the truth that slips through the cracks of official reports and whispers its way into late-night labs. This was not our first contact. It may not even be contact at all. because this feels less like communication and more like recalibration. What if 3i Atlas wasn't designed to engage us, but to awaken something else? What if it came here not to explore, but to check a box, to deliver a code, to test a link, to confirm a dormant connection still works? And once it did, it simply stopped. It didn't leave. It blended into the silence, into the system, into the places we no longer look. And that's the final horror. Not that we saw something alive, but that we witnessed the machinery of something far older completing a task we can't even begin to comprehend. And now, whatever comes next, was set into motion long before we built our first telescope. Subscribe, because the next object won't knock. It will just arrive. Turn on notifications, so you're not the last to know when the sky answers back. Share this video with someone who still thinks space is empty. And tell us in the comments, do you believe 3i Atlas is the beginning or the continuation of something we already missed? Because sometimes, the scariest discoveries aren't the ones we see. They're the ones that were waiting for us to look.